good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are watching this. So, I've had a lot of requests on a bunch of the panels that I've been on as far as creating a video of this nature. This has to do with the F word, the one that leftists like to use and always get wrong. Part of this comes from the fact that a lot of people get their information from Wikipedia. Not always a bad source of information, and I say that as somebody who has used it multiple times just to get some basic information, but I also follow the resources that are on there, the sources that are cited. However, with this specific word, there's definitely been a lot of misinformation, maybe even disinformation, especially in the last 20 to 30 years. Not really much to say other than to go ahead and get right into it. So I have had the privilege of being a teaching assistant or classroom helper, whatever you like to call it, at an elementary school. I got my hands on some old elementary school level dictionaries. The dates aren't quite on there. However, let me show you. Seems relatively old. If you look at it, it looks like it's probably from the 90s. The only proof that I really have as far as how dated it is if you go here to the very back, it says Presidents of the United States. The last one on there, Clinton. And he was president, of course, from 93 to 2001. So I'm going to assume this is probably somewhere in the mid-90s. Now, again, let's go right into it. Fascism is a political system headed by a dictator in which the government controls business and labor and opposition is not permitted. I don't see anything in there for elementary school kids that says left or right either way. Elementary dictionary. Looks to be about the same series. Intermediate. Fascism, a political system headed by a dictator in which the government controls business and labor and opposition is not permitted. Same definition. Again, for elementary school kids. But Jared, wait, that's for elementary school kids. They're not going to understand. The 1986 Encyclopedia. Fascism, in a specific sense, the political and economic system of Italy from 1922 to 1944. That's fair. However, in a more general sense, fascism is any similar system of government, one in which the state has absolute control over the people, while it still permits private enterprise. The F in the word fascism is usually capitalized when referring to Italy and not capitalized when referring to other countries. There's more in there, but that's for another time. So now it's time to go and take a look at what Wikipedia says. Fascism is a far-right, authoritarian and ultranationalist political ideology and movement that rose to prominence in the early 20th century Europe. It is characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interest for the perceived interest of a nation or race, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. That sounds like a very, very expanded definition compared to what was in the encyclopedia. Opposed to communism, democracy, liberalism, pluralism, and socialism, fascism is at the far right of the traditional left-right spectrum. Interesting that it would say that, considering, again, in the 1980s, which was much closer to 1944 when fascism in Italy ended, than today, that it says it's not far right. It doesn't have a left or right, a left or right spectrum reference to it, and yet here we do. If you just look at, I use DuckDuckGo, but this is the Google AI response. It simply says, a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator, a capitalist economy subject to stringent government controls, violent suppression of the opposition, and typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. Now, interesting, because the policy of belligerent nationalism, and racism wasn't a part of the original definition. The search assist down here says far-right political ideology. Huh. Here again we have the Wikipedia article. Interesting. Now some people try and argue about, well, Mussolini was the first fascist dictator, of course, so let's go look at him. This is from the Britannica. Benito Mussolini was Europe's first 20th century fascist dictator, but Mussolini's political orientation didn't always lean that way. His father was an ardent socialist who worked part-time as a journalist for leftist publications. In his initial overtures into politics, Mussolini's beliefs took after his father's. He spent time organizing with trade unions and writing for socialist publications in Switzerland and Italy. Interesting. Now they add in here, Mussolini's politics took a turn to the right midway through World War I, and he became a proponent for the war effort. Now, I didn't add anything additional about Mussolini because I'm focusing on just the broad definition of fascism here. But growing up, I didn't learn anything about Mussolini being on the right. And I'm in my late 30s. Let's continue. It was during this period, and after, that the nationalist and anti-Bolshevik strands of thought that would characterize his later politics began to emerge. I mean, that's fair. These politics included the themes of racial superiority, xenophobia, and imperialism that defined his actions as a dictator. That's very interesting, because I was never taught he espoused racial superiority. Because that was Germany's politics at the time. When their far right wing came to power. So I find that highly interesting. Encyclopedia Britannica now has that up. I will go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Often, fascism. This is the capital F. A populist political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by forcible suppression of opposition. That's much closer to the definitions that I read out. And I give some examples here. Broadly, a philosophy or system with some combination of fascist values and governing structures. That seems like a circular definition there. When you say broadly, fascism is a philosophy or system with some combination of fascist values. So Merriam-Webster, you might want to look at that. 2, a tendency toward or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. Okay, that sounds pretty general, like what I read. The early instances of army fascism and brutality are typical, from Jason Watson Aldridge. Okay. Sounds very very generalized. These are the kind of things that we definitely need to talk about, especially, as I mentioned in the beginning, from the last 20 or so years, changing definitions, especially things like this, because people have been painted with this kind of a broad brush, but they've been allowed to be painted that way because things have been changed. And part of the reason why this is concerning, historically, Italy and Germany were opposed to each other. They were allied, of course. But if you look at some history, apparently the Austrian painter came to power and opposed Mussolini. They came to be at loggerheads, I guess would be the best words to use. And so, are they both really that right wing? Just some food for thought. If you liked what I had to say here, and you want to go ahead and support the channel, please go ahead and check the description below. I'm going to be making more videos on other words. I always enjoy going to panels on some certain shows, such as Abe Dinkus, Emmett, and a bunch of others. Take care.